You probably think barbarian is the most fun class in Diablo 4.
Is it though?
Or maybe the rogue, or maybe the sorcerer, maybe the druid, and you cannot deny the necro. But listen, we're gonna have a how much fun tier list on all the classes in Diablo 4 currently, based on our experience. It's very subjective, okay?
Yeah,
It's
not
like,
on damage, clearly.
yeah, well, I mean, damage is very, very debatable. However, it's interesting to talk about and very much more interesting to see how you guys would see this based on what we decide to rank these based off fun, okay? Now, before we get into it, just make sure to click that subscribe-doo and that notification-roo so you don't miss out on any of these videos from Diablo Forever. We'd really appreciate it. It helps us grow with the channel and it gets you more content for Diablo 4. All right, let's start it off with, well, we hold the Sorcerer here. And I have to say, Sorcerer was one of the most favorite for everybody. I remember a lot of people when they first started out with the server slants and the betas and all of that.
Super
everybody was playing Sorcerer. And to be fair, visually, Sorcerer, I think, hits a lot of points. It has some of the coolest animated abilities in the world. I think where it loses out though is a little bit in the build variety, and I know that can factor into the fun elements as well. If you like want to play like different multiple builds, sure you can go for it. But if you're interested on just performing and having, you know, the most bombastic dealing damage all around play, well, there's only kind of one build.
Yeah, I mean, we're not really talking about numbers and everything like that, but the fact that kind of Firewall is the only real way to go forward, like up until level 50, pretty much anything goes, and you can definitely have fun with fire and cold and lightning, all of that, and we definitely did, but you cannot, you know, just stay for 30 minutes and hit a boss with your cold spells just because you cannot be bothered to play Firewall or anything like that. Outside of that, I feel like Sorcerer, in terms of fun, it gives you pretty much everything that you would expect a mage class in Diablo would give you, with all of the shields that you have, the teleports, the moving around, the effectiveness of the battlefield, not to mention the addition of Inferno this time around is so cool to ever use, and just like squeeze and group everything up. That did a lot for me. But it still feels like it's a little bit missing.
Yeah, it's very fun early on, but it tends to become a little bit weaker later in the game. And once again, for us, fun also involves build variety, right? Like sometimes I just get bored of a build and I want to try something out. If that build isn't fun or isn't doing what it's supposed to, I guess we can place this one in B or C.
Yeah, B would be for me.
Okay, yeah. B tier in terms of like fun. Yeah, Sorceress is there. Now comes the Rogue, and the Rogue is, first of all, it has multiple builds, which are all pretty fun. The fact that you can go for a ranged build and then switch to a melee build, and even in between these, you have like the penetrating shot, or you have the barrage, which is like really cool, or you have like the flurry build or the twisting blades build, and all of these are viable and fun and very, very awesome to play, and with their own increments of fun playstyle. Like Twisting Blades is like all dashing, moving fast all around, not giving a fuck about anything, and it's blasting all the way through. The Flurry build is much more in your face. You stay there, you poison everybody up, and you start like, it's really cool because you think Rogue is a squishy class, and it is. But with the Flurry build, you get so much attack speed and healing off to those attacks, you can just sit there with everybody and just, come on, bring it.
That's really cool, because I definitely was surprised. I'm not normally a Rogue player, but I'm definitely pleasantly surprised of how they made the Rogue in Diablo 4 with, yeah, you're squishy, but you're squishy in the right way, where you have a lot of mobility, as opposed to Sorcerer, for instance, who's normally supposed to be squishy, but has some of the tankiest options out there, which doesn't really make sense for a Sorcerer. But for Rogue, just maneuvering around the battlefield, and even if you play range, which is something that I dabbled with most of all, it's really cool. That like it brings all the cool stuff that I enjoyed in a range isometric RPG playstyle, and taking away all the things that I didn't particularly like about Demon Hunter in Diablo 3. This is the best version of a range character that I have ever played into a Diablo game, and it has surprised me to be one of the funnest, if not the most fun class so far.
Yeah, you cannot get enough of like super big crits with your penetrating shot or barrages if you're into that. It's
Rain
really
of
awesome.
Arrows, dude, that's such a visual masterpiece.
Yes, and there's also a legendary that like can proc a big volley of arrows all around if you play the melee build. So you combine that with all of the like bombastic and fast playstyle. Other than the fact that it's very viable in terms of like end game, and you can really like push high nightmare keys. Apart from all that, it's just a fun class with multiple builds that are all fun in the right way. And
sure.
because of that, we have to place this one into S tier.
Definitely S
There's
tier.
there's no argument to be made here. Okay, next on the list is Mr. Necromancer. And you played a lot more Necromancer than I did. So
well, Necromancer is always one of the main characters that I ever play in Diablo games whenever they add the Necromancer into the game, because we know Diablo 3's history. And they did it really well this time around. You do have some build diversity as opposed to what Sorcerer brings to the table, and you have some of the more interesting ways to build a minion army as opposed to what we used to do before. And it's a lot more, let's say, meaty. It's a lot more rewarding. Where in Diablo 3, for instance, you just like charged your skeletons to a target, which was a
Diablo
quality of life
2,
ability.
you mean, right?
No, Diablo 3.
Oh, 3.
Diablo,
we have Necromancer in Diablo 3, I forgot.
Diablo 2 is just a passive army that does a lot of damage. So now you have the big army that you had in Diablo 2, and you definitely have the more controlled version of your skeletons and golems as well from Diablo 3. And it comes around into a much cooler build to build around, not to mention with all of the blood abilities, which was something that Diablo 3 really added and made the Necromancer feel like an explosive class. It's very satisfying to shoot out those blood surges and just destroy and delete everything all around, and that's a very satisfying thing. And even you can even play the visceral bone spears that pretty much everybody's playing right now at the higher echelons of the end game, and it's still super satisfying. I feel like everything that a caster can do, I think Necromancer, just for me, does it way better than Sorcerer.
Yeah, and it definitely has its appeal in terms of like all of the explosions around and all of the minions. The appeal is there for sure. I don't know, did they fix that visual bug where at some point you cannot see anything up on the ground? I don't know what was the ability.
Oh, I haven't noticed any bug.
You cannot see anything. I forgot what the thing was called, but you placed up a lot of like darkish pools all around there. At some point, nothing was visible.
Oh yeah, the corpse explosion. No, I think that's still in. If you do play the corpse explosion, where corpse explosion just turns into like a cloud of shadow damage. If you stack a bunch, yeah, it's kind of obscures it. I thought that was just by game design, because it just clumps up all of those particles and you don't see anything. Yeah, that's probably gonna need to be fixed. However, outside of that, it's just like super satisfying. Like everything gory and macabre about Diablo 4 is basically in the Necromancer. For me, it's easy S tier.
Okay, another S tier, boys and gals. Next on the list, the Barbarian. Barbarian, another, I would say, fan favorite for most of the Diablo players. The Barbarian is once again one class that can lean on different builds, and they're all fun in their own way. I played the most Barbarian, so I kind of dabbled into all of them. You have like your whirlwind, obviously, which is like super popular. You have your Hammer of the Ancients. You have your rend builds. There's I think the double swing ravage things. There's multiple builds over there as well. However, I cannot say I had more fun with Barbarian than I had with Rogues. This is the thing, right? Barbarian, it still feels, even though it's very good, it's very meaty, very impactful, very visceral, definitely, like they checked all the marks correctly. It still feels that there's this I don't know, lingering sense of you're not quite there yet in terms of like in your face getting to mob. So with Barbarian, still have a lot of issues with range mobs, especially if you're playing like later on into the end game.
You mean chasing the succubuses, right?
The succubuses are just
all the goddamn time.
So annoying for barbarians. This is I think the only gripe I would have with Barbarian, and it is sort of my main. I'm having tons of fun with it, and it's like I'm playing the whirlwind currently, but I did play the Hammer of the Ancients and the rend. Whirlwind feels the most fun, but because it doesn't feel just yet there, I'm not gonna place it into S tier.
That's the thing, because I'm usually a Barbarian player in the Diablo games, and this was surprising for me as well. It's interesting that you pointed it out. In terms of melee fantasy, even though I play more range rogue than melee, I found that the melee responsiveness in the combat of rogue was way superior to Barbarian.
Yes.
Sure, Barbarian is meaty, and it feels like you're a big hulking mass of muscle and steel on the battleground, which is fine. But I feel like the animations are just a smidge below everybody else's. I feel like Rogue is super responsive, super clean, super smart with all the daggers and the sword animations and how it feels when you're impacting an enemy with it. Barbarian feels a little bit more clunky, as opposed to what Barbarian kind of felt in other Diablo games, specifically in Diablo 3, where I have hundreds of hours of Barbarian play. It's kind of missing a little bit of like, oh slap, you destroyed the ground. And that's why I've kind of like Rogue's melee playstyle, gameplay, and all-around feel a little bit more than barbarian.
But once again, this is very subjective.
Yeah.
This is our take on it. We're definitely curious on what your take is on, so make sure you leave it in the comments. But we'll place barbarian into A tier. It could have been S tier if it had a little bit more meat in terms of mobility and responsiveness. You mentioned that, but I'm telling you, whirlwind sometimes just will not start. I don't know what the hell is happening. It's either a bug or something. I'm sitting there with my finger on the mouse and it just won't start. It takes a while to start up.
Some bugs here and there. Again, they're fixing them though, so eventually it's gonna be fine.
Okay, so last on the list we have the druid, which would be your main.
Yes, it is what I'm playing the most at the moment, and it is my second best favorite class. It's usually a toss-up between Necromancer and Druid in Diablo games. And it has, to be fair, as opposed to Barbarian, it has some of the more impactful media abilities. I feel like
I've seen that.
Like the Werebear Pulverize, that is the most satisfying you can do. And I haven't been able to play all of the builds yet because I'm just not getting the uniques to play the Werewolf builds and the Tornado builds. They're fun. The spellcasting build is a little bit underwhelming. Like, in terms of spellcasters, I would probably have to rank Druid least, and that's a big shame because in Diablo 2, Spellcaster Druid was very satisfying, was very visually pleasing. You brought Armageddon and you fissured the ground and all of that. And even with the boulder, which was changed from Diablo 2 to be like just a rock now, it's just a little bit underwhelming. Werebear by far the best playstyle experience that I've had. Werewolf was fine, but it was kind of like a super underwhelming rogue in terms of how it felt in combat, both visually and audibly. You just like clawed a little bit, but it was no
scratch all over the place.
There was no slashing sounds or like super blood going all over it, which is probably what Werewolf is supposed to be, and it's still missing a lot of damage from the poison, because a fantasy of Druid's Werewolf is that you're a rabid dog and you just spread poison everywhere. They've buffed it, but it still feels a little bit like lackluster, and that pulled a little bit away for the fantasy for me. So if it was just pure Werebear, it would be S tier, but because of all of that, I would probably put it alongside Barbarian.
Okay, so it's still an A tier, right?
Yes, it's still really good. You're gonna have a lot of fun, and it's doing well, but it needs improvements on a bunch of areas.
All right, so based on what we experienced and what we think so far with the classes in Diablo 4, we have like the biggest fun we've had was on the Rogue and the Necromancer. We still had like pretty much good fun all around with Barbarian and Druid. Kind of sketchy. Not that
the thing is, even all of this is a very fun experience. Like the gameplay this just gives me a feel of Blizzard. Blizzard always had a good way of designing cool gameplay and making you feel really cool doing things in their video games, and Diablo 4 is definitely not an exception. It feels great doing most of all things, but if we're gonna, like say one is better than the other, then that's kind of how we're going to rank them based in a tier list fashion. They're still all really good. Oh,
for sure. And make sure you also let us know in the comments how you would rank these and what was your experience playing any of these classes. Very curious to know. Don't forget, click that subscribe button and enable those notifications so you don't miss out on any of the videos we put out. We're covering news, we're covering guides, we're covering tier lists in the future. A lot of good stuff coming from Diablo Forever. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
See you in the next one. Bye.